All right, welcome. This is the session on introducing Rancher extensions. My name is Neil McDougall, and I'm the Director of Engineering for User Interface and User Experience within Rancher. In this session, I'm going to obviously introduce you to Rancher extensions. I'm going to explain to you what they are, tell you a bit about what you can do with them, what we as Rancher are doing, our roadmap. I'm going to give you a demo, so if you haven't seen them, you can see them for yourself, where it is within the Rancher UI, how you add new extensions, the example extensions we've got. So hopefully give you a flavor for all things Rancher extensions. Kind of leading into that, what is it that motivated us to build Rancher extensions? This next slide is our kind of mission statement. This is the goal I like to tell my team to have in mind when we're thinking about Rancher extensions. And that's to allow ourselves, users, developers, partners, and customers to be able to independently extend and enhance the Rancher UI. So there's a lot packed into that one sentence. So maybe we could break it down a little bit. Extend and enhance the Rancher UI. This is the crux of what we're talking about here. With Rancher extensions, we are enabling other people to develop deep integrations into the Rancher UI. So you could integrate a third-party product. You might have a system that provides extra data and you want to overlay that data within the Rancher UI. You might have some custom workflows or some custom portal software, all those kind of things. At the moment, there is no way to integrate them into Rancher from a UI point of view. What we want to do is allow people to really do deep integrations so that you can surface up data from those tools, for example, into the UI, so they're in context of where the user is looking. You might have a richer experience and you want to provide it where the user is. You want a single pane of glass for everything the user is doing with regard to kind of Kubernetes management. So this is the kind of crux of what we're talking about here. And I talk about deep integrations. The point here is, with all of this, people who develop Rancher extensions are going to be building user interfaces. You can obviously integrate an existing user interface, but you can also build new user interface. And that lets you do deep integrations, as I've talked about. We'll touch on this a bit later on in the talk, but this is quite an important point. We're not just talking about very sort of shallow integrations where, you iframe something or you switch from one UI to another sort of, more easily. We're talking about a much deeper integration mechanism. Independently. So why is that important? Well, at the moment, it's the Rancher engineering team that build the Rancher UI. You can't add any more. You could come up with something and approach us and, hey, could I include this? That would have to go into our code base. You'd have to wait for a release cycle. So it's not really useful for developers to be able to do that. So what we want to do is decouple things so that other people outside of Rancher can extend the functionality completely independently. So they can build, develop, release, publish, and maintain extensions without any interaction with Rancher. So as it says here, that includes separate release schedules. And the point I want to make on this kind of bob here is we as Rancher have extensions that we're developing and we want to make available and add into the Rancher UI. Elemental and Kubewarden shown here, those are the first two that we've released. The point is we can ourselves develop and release those independently of Rancher. So Rancher itself has a release schedule. These other products and projects we're working on will have their own release schedules, and we don't have to now tie the UI of one to the other. So we can release Rancher quarterly or whatever we choose to do, and then we can release Elemental and Kubewarden on their own schedules and improve the UI, and users will get that enhanced experience within their Rancher Manager UI without any issue. All right, users, developers, partners, and customers. So why is this important, right? I mentioned Rancher, I've talked about Rancher engineering, I've talked to my team that builds UI. We really want to open up extending Rancher beyond just Rancher, right? We want to allow anyone to do this. Open source community user, developer, partners, and customers. We really want to kind of put this out there, see what can people do, and what can you kind of build on top of Rancher. Highlighting partners and customers. I think the key thing for me here is As a partner and a customer, often you want to integrate Rancher into your environment, right? You're going to have workflows, you can have processes, you're going to have other tools that you use as part of your day-to-day work with Kubernetes. We want to enable you to just add that little bit extra into Rancher to make it easier for your users to use Rancher alongside the other tools and processes that you might have in place. And then lastly, ourselves, right? Why is this important? Well, we want to make sure that Rancher or Rancher engineering is using the same APIs as everyone else. This is not intended to be like a bolt-on where Rancher itself kind of uses behind the scenes APIs. Everyone else gets this API and can't quite do the same. And we're not at this point yet. What we want to make sure is that we're building, Rancher really as a platform, and the UI as a platform, and that we ourselves use the same APIs as you would use if you weren't Rancher. So the point there is we're going to refactor the Rancher UI to really be a set of extensions. They would be built into Rancher, but they will use the same approach as we're talking about today that everyone else would use who isn't part of the Rancher engineering team. All right, so that was quite a lot on that one sentence, but hopefully it gave you a bit of a feel for the motivation and the different aspects of why we're doing Rancher extensions. At a high level, Rancher extensions, we introduced those in Rancher 2.7. More recently in Rancher 2.7.2, we added some more extension points. If you go into the Rancher UI, haven't seen it, when you bring in the slide in that menu, as an administrator, you will now see a new top-level extensions item. So click on that, you'll be able to manage extensions, install, upgrade, all that good stuff. And we'll show that in the demo section in a bit. Point here is there is a backend piece associated with extensions called the extensions operator. This needs to be installed for extensions to work, but the UI will help you do that. And as Rancher, we've made two extensions available to date. I've mentioned those, the Elemental and the Kubewarden extensions, but we also use the extensions mechanism for Harvester. So Harvester uses this mechanism, it's just delivered a little bit differently. Tiny bit more detail, really at the high level, building on the single line sentence at the start. Source code for extensions is managed completely separately in independent source code repositories. So again, this is really talking to that independence. You don't have to, give us PRs or try and get the code into one of our repositories. You can build and manage them all by yourself. They're packaged as Helm charts. You can obviously package those into Helm repositories containing extensions, and those are then managed using the same repository mechanism we have for Helm charts and apps within the Rancher UI, so within the apps and marketplace feature, if you're familiar with that. An extension has a new Kubernetes custom resource, which we deployed by the Helm chart, and then this extensions operator that I mentioned, it will sit there and it will monitor, looking for these new resources. It will fetch the resources associated with that and cache them and then serve them up to the UI. So that's just some of the background implementation. And we as Rancher currently provide a single catalog, which is a Helm repository, and this is for the extensions that Rancher is authored. So currently Elemental and Kubewarden, and we'll touch on that a bit later on as well with where we're going with that aspect. Okay, so catalogs, touched on it sooner than I thought. I've talked about the Rancher catalog, that's the one we have today. The partner catalog is one we'll be adding soon. And this mirrors very much what we do in Apps and Marketplace. If you are a partner and you want to get your extension into our partner catalog, so it appears inside of Rancher, then we'll be adding a partner catalog to kind of mirror the Helm chart partner catalog. But this will obviously be for extensions. You can come and talk to us and we can work with you to get your UI extension into the partner catalog. So that just gives some differentiation in the UI, right? So you can see the ones that are developed, maintained, supported by Rancher as kind of official extensions, if you like, partner extensions that have been developed, maintained by partners and have some level of validation against them and trust and support. Then we have, thirdly, the community repository that we'll be adding soon as well, where you might be an open source developer and you might build a small extension and you want to have an easy way of kind of advertising that to the community rather than everybody having a gazillion Helm repositories. We want to have a community Helm repository where you can submit your extension and we'll include it in there so they get some visibility within the UI that people might be interested in. But obviously with those, there's an aspect of people need to check where those have been authored and whether that's an extension they're comfortable deploying into their system. And then lastly, custom ones I mentioned, right? You as a customer partner, open source developer, you can put out your own Helm repository, publish your extensions there, and add that Helm repository into Rancher. All right, kind of very high level overview. I'm not going to go into too much here technically, but starting at the bottom, shared libraries. This slide really speaks to how we are re-architecting the Rancher UI to support extensions. And this is work in progress, right? We're not, or by no means, done with this work. But let's start at the bottom. We are refactoring Rancher to have a number of shared libraries. UI components, kind of an obvious one, right? We are factoring out our component library that we use so other people can use that if they wish to get the same sort of look and feel. We obviously have some core functionality that needs to be there, some core libraries people might want to use, and I'm sure there will be others. Building on top of that, we have something we call the dashboard shell. This is again work in progress. This is very much about sort of shrinking down the surface of the Rancher UI to be the kind of bare minimum of what's needed to give you the application and all of the code in there that can talk to the Rancher API, that can do authentication, can manage extensions, all that kind of core stuff, user preferences, settings, home screen. And then around that, we want to build extensions, basically. Now, some of those, if you look on the right, might be built in. If you just had that raw shell, it would come with nothing in it. You have to install a bunch of extensions. So as Rancher, the product will come with a number of built-in extensions, things that are currently built in, but they're not modeled as extensions. So the Cluster Explorer, the apps and marketplace, the fleet or continuous delivery experience, the cluster management, all of those things currently, you see them in that sliding menu. They're all just built in to the code base. They don't use the same kind of extension mechanism. So we're going to refactor those, turn them into extensions, bundle them and build them in with Rancher. Key thing there being, as I was trying to say at the start there, using the same extensions API. On the top, also developed by Rancher, Harvester, Elemental, Kubewarden. Currently, we will be adding more. These are extensions we're developing. They'll go into the Rancher catalog. But these can be added at runtime. So they don't ship with Rancher. If you deploy 2.7.5 of Rancher and then at some point that's a nice extension, you can install it, you can upgrade it, you can remove it. It has its own life cycle. It's not bundled in with Rancher. And then equally on the left side, same pattern as the ones I just talked about, but not developed by us, developed by other people, partners, customers, third parties, developers, open source users. So this is the very high level, but trying to kind of illustrate some of the points I led into at the start there with the fact we want to have one API for everybody, and we've got these different repositories and kind of classes of extensions. All right, so that was a breeze-in intro. I wanted to move on now to talk about what can extensions do, and this very much is a what's the API. Again, we've got an initial version of this, and this is something that we are building on and building out over time. So, if you engage with us with extensions, you'll see hopefully over time, we're going to improve this. We'll be building out better APIs and allowing you to do a lot more than you can do today. So, boom, first bullet point done, right? We're building out a bunch of extension points over time. Reiterate what I said earlier on. These APIs are about enabling deeper integration into the Rancher UI, and we'll talk on that in the coming slides around some examples of the kind of things that you can do. As I said, Rancher 2.7.2, we added more, so we added panels, tabs, actions, examples of the kind of things you can do. And again, I'll touch a bit more on some of these in the next slides. You can add a top level, we call them products, but menu item in the sliding menu, like fleet, continuous delivery. You can have support for custom resources. This is really a core use case, right? And both the Elemental and the Kubewarden extensions are examples of this, where often a tool like Kubewarden, for something like Cert Manager, those kind of things, very much introduce new custom resource definitions into your Kubernetes clusters. And what you would like to do is build a nice UI to let you explore and manage those custom resources. Core use case is very much how the core of the existing Rancher UI works today. And so with Rancher extensions, you can build your own UI for custom resources. So you can create, or you can configure the list view that we have, you can configure a detail view, you can configure the edit and config view. So that's a core use case. Other things you can do, customize the landing page. So when you come in, you can change that screen if you like. Quite a useful one for customers and partners, right? Instead of coming in and just seeing the list of clusters and the Rancher welcome screen, you can pull data from other systems and show a kind of portal landing page to your users. Adding support for new cloud providers. This was added recently. I'll demo this later on. So if you are somebody who has an infrastructure provider or has a technology like that, you can extend the UI so you can provide experiences for managing credentials and then machine configurations when somebody wants to use your provider. And that's analogous to what you could do in the legacy UI with the no driver UIs. You can make more advanced branding changes. You can add custom panels, tabs, and actions to existing views, and we'll touch on that in a second. So to go in a bit more, I talked about products. I talked about, we call those the things that come in the sliding menu. Just to talk about it again, see the sliding menu there. You can see I've got OS management. This is an example of an extension adding a product at the very top level. And so you can add into that menu. When the user clicks, the screen is yours, apart from the top bar. You can knock yourself out and do what you want. So it's a very top level extension. As I said, Elemental is an example of that. We'll show that real quick when I do the demo. Explorer, or extending an existing product if you like, and it doesn't have to be just Explorer. It can be, Fleet or continuous delivery one, but Explorer is the sort of the product with the most richest functionality. You can add your own menu item into the site. So again, showing Cube Warden here, that's a good example of this, where you can add to the side nav. It can have child items. You can customize those views. Cube Warden actually also illustrates the pattern that we're trying to establish, where when you install an extension, if it needs additional functionality to be installed into the back end, that it can help guide you through that process. So we'll demo this in a second, but when you install an extension, we don't ask you for any parameters. It's not a Helm install in that you can configure values and fill out a form. We just want you to choose a version and hit a button. Get the extension installed easily. Don't have to worry about any config and understanding what that might mean. Install the extension, and then if that extension requires some underlying CRDs or other Helm charts or operators to be installed, it can guide you through that. And so that's something we started with, and there's still more work to do there, but that's the pattern we want to try and encourage people to use. Panels, this was something added in 2.7.2, and this speaks to the deeper integration I'm talking about here, right? Where you see that red bar. We are within some of the existing views. So again, this is an example of Explorer, but within existing views, we are identifying panels or areas where you might want to insert a custom piece of UI, a custom component or a panel. And there's quite a bit of flexibility on this in terms of you can choose when your component should show up. So what resource, what kind of product, all this kind of stuff. So you can customize it to make sure it only appears where you want it to. But within that space, you can kind of do what you want if you like. So an example might be you've got some tool that maybe checks for compliance, right? So I'm looking at deployments here. I could be looking at secrets, right? But you're looking at deployments, and your tool maybe can check through those deployments and see whether they've all got an annotation or a label, something like that. Maybe you're using a third-party tool. Maybe it's something you've written yourself. That tool might then put annotations on these resources to say whether they comply or not. Your extension here could check those. Hey, and if something's not in compliance, it could add a banner at the top to say, one or more of your resources does not meet your company standard, something like that. So you can start to, look at the data and maybe the reports generated by other tools and surface them in the UI. You could also extend this to annotate each of the items individually. But at a top level, you could also show a banner or something, say, hey, there's something not right here. So that's the kind of integration we want to do, where you can put your information within the current UI as well as adding your UI at the top level and within the side nav. Actions. This is a different aspect of the UI that you can modify, but again, it allows you to integrate your tools. So the top right there in that red box, these are sort of global actions right there appear in the header bar. Again, you can choose when they appear. The sort of second image where we've got those red items, that's illustrating an action menu, right? So if you've got resource, I think this is showing repositories, right? You can click on the three dots when you see a set of resources and you get that action menu. We're letting you add your own actions into that menu. So that example I had around compliance, maybe it doesn't scan in the background, but it's something you have to invoke. So you come in here, you've added a custom action. When you right click, you've got a new scan action. You hit scan, it goes off and does something, or maybe it switches to a new page or pops up a dialog. That's the sort of thing you can now start to do. And then lastly, tabs. So showing a node here, this is the node detail view where at the top you see we show some general information, and then in order to accommodate lots of more detailed information, we have these tabs, and we allow you now to add your own tab. So again, the scan idea, I might have something that's scanning my nodes looking for problems, and I could put my banner in the previous page or the list page to say, hey, there's a problem with one of your nodes. Maybe when I click in, there's a scan results tab, and that shows me the details of the scan results that have come from my tool that is scanning my system for compliance. So, you can start to put in data from your own tools. It could be some metric data here, like I say, scanning data, all that kind of stuff. But it's then within the context of the user looking at this node. All right, demo time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch, and I'm going to give you a demo of the Rancher UI. I'm going to focus on extensions, and hopefully I'll be able to cover some of the topics that I've just talked through while I've been doing that demo. Okay, so here's the Rancher UI. I've already logged in. I'm an administrator, so I see the new extensions menu item. I've not enabled extensions, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Hit enable. This will take a second or two. This uses Helm to install a small Helm chart that adds the Rancher extensions operator. Small backend piece required for extensions to work. Take a second or two. On updates, there we go. On this version, it should show me the two from the catalog. So you can see I've got Elemental and Cube Warden. Let me go ahead and install Elemental. There's only one version, so I don't need to pick. I'll install that one. And let's go Cube Warden. Excuse me. Multiple versions, so I can pick which one I want. I'll choose the latest and install that one. All right, they'll take a second or two, and it'll ask me to reload. While it's doing that, I'm going to go into repositories. So we use the same UI in the downstream Rancher management cluster to manage Helm repositories as you would normally. So we jump you in here. You're not going to do this very often. This allows you to add a new repository. The extensions are Helm charts just like anything else. So I can go ahead and add my repo. I'm going to add the Rancher extensions repository, example one. This contains some examples more kind of aimed at developers. So not something we'd expect you to install in a production Rancher, but exemplars for you to see how to do stuff. So let me go ahead and do that repository, and it'll sync. If I go back, so I'm getting my reload message from my installations of these two, and if I go to available, I see some more extensions. Let me hit reload. Awesome, right, installed, got all of them, and if I look here now, I see OS management in the menu, go in, and I've got the Elemental UI experience, all provided by that extension. I've got a nice dashboard view, I've got views for all of the custom resources. I can go in and look at those, and I've got custom experiences for creating and listing and managing those. So as I say, all provided by that extension. It can be updated, upgraded independently of Rancher. So you can be on deployed Rancher 2.7.4. We might have rolled out Elemental UI 1.1.2.3, whatever, and you can just update that without having to update your Rancher version. You can obviously do it on a different release cycle. So that's Elemental, example of top level product I talked about. If I jump in here into the cluster, Cube Warden shows up. Again, I've got a nice dashboard view, and I can see UIs or custom UIs for policy servers. I could go and create one. I get a custom form. Policies, I could go and create them and get a custom form. So nice experience for Cube Warden and Elemental. Those are our two extensions that we've published and supported. So you get a feel for the kind of stuff you can do. Let me jump back and look at some of the examples, right? So if I go back here, we can see a few. I'm going to install a couple of these. So clock, install that one, and I'm going to install homepage. Now there's a few versions. I'm going to go install 0.20 just for fun. So not the latest version. And I'm lastly going to install, let's see, I'm going to install this extensions API demo, which is a little bit of a kitchen sink for the new features added in 2.7.2. So there's one more you can see that needs to install. As soon as that bubbles, I will hit reload, and they should all be there. Awesome. Now let's take a look at those, right? So if I go home, now may not be this useful, but you can see I've got 0.2 of a new landing page. So, sorry, customer, partner, whatever. You might want to change the screen. You might want to bring in data from your external system. You might want to add your own documentation links, whatever. You might want to totally customize this. You can do that with an extension. I've added clock. Okay, again, not the most useful, but if you actually look at the example, the code is super thin because it doesn't do much. So you can really see what it is that you have to do to be able to add this top level product where you can take over all of this section of the UI and kind of do what you want, right? We're just showing a clock. So this illustrates adding a top level item with a clock. Great little example. The other examples, if I jump into to my cluster, we'll show a few things. Boom, cluster dashboard. You can see these cards. Again, they're not useful. They're not intended to show any real functionality, but they're intended to show you how you can add custom cards to the cluster dashboard page. Up here, I've got a couple of custom global actions that I've added, and you can see that they support keyboard shortcuts. So again, your extension could do that, add a keyboard shortcut to the UI and or a action up here, click it, you might get a dialog, a slide in, whatever, to integrate some more functionality. If I go to, let's see, repositories, I think, if I look in here, look at my list of repositories, will show, if I click on an action, a couple of custom actions. So again, if you want to extend the UI, hey, I've got something I can do to repositories, then there's a way you can target the repository resource, add an action, and that can kick off some functionality of your own, or again, pop up some new UI. That's kind of the actions. If I go to installed apps, I think here's a banner. Okay, it doesn't do much, but again, if you remember that use case, I could come in here, we could be analyzing some information or calling a backend API, finding out some stuff that we want to tell the user, and we could put a banner here, or this could show some information. It doesn't just have to be a banner. So you get the idea. They're not intended, as I say, to be useful, but they're trying to make it easy to understand how you would add in your pieces into the UI. I think there's tab somewhere. Well, for the sake of time, we'll skip that for now. But you get the idea, right? You get the idea of this sort of deeper integration. Now, if I go back up to extensions, you remember I installed 0.2 of homepage. So I do get a little badge here telling me there are updates. If I go on this, it's telling me I can upgrade homepage from 0.2 to 0.30. So I'm going to go and do an update that. Just take a second. See, it's installing, and then when it's done, I need to reload. And I go home now. I'm on 0.30 and it's purple rather than black. Just that illustrates the upgrade cycle. Obviously, you could roll back. I can uninstall, right? So if I uninstall the homepage, I should go back to the standard Rancher homepage. All good stuff. Now, lastly, I just want to show the node driver example. So I need to switch systems, but if we just go to cluster management on this system and cloud credentials and create, look at OpenStack. So you'll see I don't have any, I don't have my extension installed. So all we can do is look at the node driver and guess. So guess, we can look at what fields it has and just generate this form. And it's not very, very helpful, right? We're not doing any validation. We're not giving you choices or anything like that. So it's very hard to get to work. If I actually try to create a cluster, OpenStack, got my credential, you'll see again, when it actually comes to the machine pool configuration, there's just a ton of fields. You know, let's see if availability zones, it's freeform. They're all freeform text. Flavors, right? Which flavor to use? You have to know either the ID or the name. And I know there are issues if you specify both. So it's not really a great experience because all we're doing is introspecting the driver to see what it supports and then trying to generate a UI for it. So let me just switch systems to one that has access to a local OpenStack environment. If I go into here, go to extensions, you'll see I've already loaded my OpenStack node driver UI extension. And now when I go cluster management, let me kill that one which I created earlier on. We got clusters here. Never mind, we'll create a new one. If I go here, hit OpenStack, now I can see that I get a custom UI. I'm not getting that single password field. This has been provided by my extension. It's create a custom form, so I can put in my OpenStack URL. I can give it my domain. I can give it my username. And you can see there we can actually do form validation, right? So you can't proceed until you've entered all the fields. I've gone out to the OpenStack API, retrieved the list of projects, done some validation, that all works, and I'm good to go. Let me just delete the old, can I? We'll leave that as. If I now go to clusters and create a cluster, OpenStack, I've got a select credential because I've got multiple. I'll pick the one I just created, OpenStack. I'm going to give it a name. And you can see the second piece here, in addition to the custom UI for the cloud credential, I've got a custom UI for the machine pool configuration for OpenStack. And so now I'm presenting a much nicer form, and I can go and query the OpenStack API, and I can get the list of flavors, right? So I can search, I can know that the one I'm selecting is valid. I can choose the key pair, I can upload a private key, can change the security groups, change my networks. So these are all being populated by calls to the OpenStack API. So I know the values in here are good, right? Custom values, I can add validation, but I can present an experience to the customer that's going out fetching their flavors, that's going out fetching the security groups. So that's obviously much less error prone. Hit create, it'll take a while, but that one they'll go off and create a cluster, and you can see the one I had earlier on, which I've done previously, it came up, right? So I can now provision an RK2 cluster through the UI with a nice guided UI experience with components tailored to this node driver. So that's a node driver example. It uses the same extension mechanism, the general way of registering components as other ones do, but it's obviously, you have to provide a cloud credential UI component and a machine config UI component. There's a way of registering those. We've got this documented in the documentation we have. But hopefully it gives you a flavor of the kind of things you can do. I know there's a lot of people would like to be able to add custom node driver support for their products and their infrastructure providers. So that's it. That's the demo. Hopefully that gave you a good flow through the sort of general areas where you can do deeper integration, as well as showing you how you can do things like custom node drivers. All right, thank you. Welcome back to the slides. Obviously, you've seen a lot here about motivations for doing extensions and what we've done so far, how it works. In order for people to actually embrace this and build extensions, we need to really support developers. So this is something we started on. It's obviously a journey. We wanted to get extensions to a point where we felt it was usable. We know there is more to do, but rather than just wait another 6 or 12 or 18 months until we felt it was perfect, we want to get something out there, right? So we're going to iterate on this. We'll be very mindful when we change things about trying not to make breaking changes. If we have to do that, we'll be super, super careful. So far, we haven't had to do that. But part of this is all about supporting and embracing developers. So to that end, one of the key things is documentation. So we now have this kind of landing site where we have our documentation. There's really two aspects to this. There's the developer docs and the sort of component style guide. I'll talk about this in a sec. Key thing also, we have an extensions channel on the Rancher user Slack. So if you're in the Rancher user Slack, look out for that. Please join that. If you have any questions about extensions, you can ask them there. The team are there, they should help you out. You can go here. This is, like I said, just the landing page, and there's two aspects, right? And maybe I'll show these in a sec. There's the storybook. This is a standard project technology for documenting component libraries. Something we're building out. We're in the process of sort of moving more of our components out of the Rancher code base into the component library, documenting them. This helps provide a consistent look and feel. You don't have to use our component library. You can use whatever you want. But if you do want to use it, we are trying to separate it out and make it much more easy to consume. Key thing really, developer documentation. Again, we've made a good start. There's more to do. We try and update this regularly. It's been a bit of a focus over the last few weeks, and going forward it will be. We very much focused on this sort of zero to hero use case, right? Just really making sure with what we have today, can somebody outside of Rancher get going, build, start, build, develop, publish, upgrade an extension on their own with our help. That's what we've been trying to do. And if let me see if I just show you this in the browser, right? If I can. Here we go. This is, you can go and check this out yourself, right, after the talk. You see we've got two aspects here. The component design kit is just standard storybook. Hopefully people are familiar with that. It's quite a nice way of going in and seeing the components. And this one's actually quite nice because you can see what they look like under different settings of the properties. So this is just the documentation for the storybook, the component guide. Then obviously there's the developer documentation. There's a quick link to extensions here. This is the bulk of what we've been working on, right? So you see that we've got some documentations here, how to get started. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we do have a couple of NPM packages we've built. They're called creators, one for a kind of skeleton app, one for an extension itself, that really help you get started. So they bootstrap the process, they create all the files you need to get started. You don't have to manually create those or use a copy of project somewhere else. So you can just hit yarn create and you're good to go. Documentation for the API, so you can see some of the concepts I've talked about here, some advanced topics, how you actually publish one. And then something we're building out here is sort of use cases, right? So trying to talk you through if you want to, if you have a pattern where you want to add a top level product, and I talked about that, here's how you do it. If you want to build a node driver UI, here's more documentation specific to that use case. So work in progress, we have some documentation here already, hopefully enough to get people started. But again, it's stuff that we're building out. Okay, that's supporting developers. Lastly, to end with, roadmap. So where are we going? In fact, where have we been? So 2.7.0, I mentioned this up front. That's when we started, and we shipped the first version of extensions. 2.7.2, we enhanced the API, been working on the documentation. Most recently in this quarter, Q2, we've been focusing on that zero to hero. We've been doing masterclasses, so if you didn't catch them, they're online. We did a global online meetup, doing an introduction to extensions, variation of this talk in some ways, and we've done 2 masterclasses. My team have done that. They've put out kind of a basic intro one and one that goes into a bit more detail. And to go with that, the docs have also been improved. Q3, we've been improving the docs, working on simplifying the APIs, introducing those 2 catalogs I mentioned. Q4, more API simplification, looking at starting to allow people to build automated tests for their extensions, or at least us providing some helpers so you don't have to do everything yourself. And then beyond that, really speaks to more of the refactoring. So splitting Rancher itself out as extensions, looking at patterns for other technologies. So I mentioned iframing up front, and I mentioned deep integrations into Rancher. We do want to enable you to do light integrations, right? We hope people will kind of integrate more deeply, but sometimes there's value in doing those, and getting started that way is a good way to get started. We want to establish patterns. So if you've got a React UI or you've got something you want to iframe in, we've got an Angular UI that we maybe have some standard patterns, minimum some documentation, so you can bring that in as a kind of start point. You've got some value from that, then hopefully you can develop that out to sort of more deeply integrate it into Rancher. Beyond that, more extension points, things like making it easy for you to add your own custom settings and user preferences, work I mentioned on the component library. And through all of this, we are trying to build out examples, so that it's a great way to learn, right? We can do the docs, but actually see an example where it covers some of the more complicated stuff. So it's not just covering the easy stuff that you can work out from the docs. Maybe it's covering some stuff that's not yet well documented, but by looking at the example, you can say, oh yeah, I see how they do it. Okay, great. And if you sort of step back from that, and if I had to put themes across what we're doing, it falls down into these five, right? So mature and solidify APIs, really improve the developer experience. So we talked about supporting developers. We really do want to make sure that it's as easy as possible to use, and we know there's a lot of work there to do with exposing some of the APIs, particularly in terms of how you interact with the Rancher API, how you fetch resources from Kubernetes, those kind of internal, those APIs, not the APIs for adding extensions in, but the APIs for the extensions themselves once they're in, how do they interact with Rancher? Those are something we are actively working on. Working with partners community. So, we've had interest from partners already and from the community. We're hoping that we'll start to see some fruits from that, and people will start kind of building their extensions and making them available. We'd love to see what people can do. So we want to support the community as much as we can. Refactor Rancher UI, so that's very much as I've mentioned about changing Rancher itself, so it uses the same APIs as we're talking about here. And then lastly, adding extension points as needed. So we have some ideas of what we think people want to do and where they might want to extend. Obviously, we ourselves, thinking about the Rancher functionality and how you would recast that as extensions, have ideas around, okay, what would that need? But we're looking to you, we're looking to users, customers, we're looking to partners. Tell us what you want to do. Can it be done? Maybe not. And we'll think about, okay, what would that need from an extension point, an API point of view? And we'll look to add those as quick as we can. Awesome. All right, that's it from me. I hope that was useful. Can't wait to see what you do. I'm really hoping we'll see some cool stuff. If you have any questions, you can find me in the Rancher user Slack in the extensions Slack channel. My team monitor that as well. Please do ask us questions, engage with us, and we look forward to seeing what you can do. Thanks for watching.